I think it's one of the scariest things is when you've got an office that's already established.
People have perhaps a preconception about you and you don't know what that's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Watching and listening to the general culture and also individual people's behaviour, that's much more important than talking to begin with.
You're listening to the British Council English Podcast, brought to you by the world's English experts.
Perfect. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of our English for Life podcast series. I'm joined today by Kate and Joe. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about a subject that I think is useful for everyone, well, most people, which is how to get along with your colleagues. And we're the perfect people to discuss it because we're colleagues.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
true. Yes.
And we get on so well with each other.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. You sound slightly sarcastic when you said that. But
Well, we've only really just met. So. But no, we do.
We're doing fine.
So basically what we're going to do is go through the kind of process of perhaps starting a new job or starting in a new office or moving to a new location. And, you know, it's never easy. Your first day, your first week, and so on with that. And then we're going to look at some of the things to think about and how you can perhaps make it a little easier or make things move forward a little faster with this. So let's start with personal experiences first. Joe, you're based in Italy.
That's right.
How long have you been there?
I've been in Italy for almost 6 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you cast your mind back to that first week when you first arrived in the new office? And what was the experience like?
Well, you know, when you first arrive in a place, it's always very daunting, getting to grips with public transport, knowing where you're going, like all the systems are new and the people are new. So, what was quite difficult in this place of work that I work for now is because a lot of the people who had been working in our office in Rome at the time had been working there for a really long time.
Okay.
So they all knew each other very, very well. And they all had their own idiosyncrasies and different things that, you know, it was like, so entering into that kind of environment, of course, they were all very welcoming and they were professional and they helped me. But, you know, I wasn't one of the gang. So and they have shared history, such a shared history together, that it was quite difficult. And some people found it quite intimidating to walk into that environment. For me, it wasn't as intimidating. I just tried to, you know, be friendly and make friends with them and also show my knowledge, because one of the things when you work at the British Council, because it's quite reputable, when you go into a new office, you do really want to like show that you know what you're talking about too.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
Of course, when Joe said quite reputable there, what she meant was very reputable.
The
but that's
most
fine.
reputable of all the reputables. Yeah.
But that's great. That point you made there is definitely one we're going to revisit a little later and go into, because it's quite a common, I think it's one of the scariest things is when you've got an office that's already established and people have been there for a long time and you're the newcomer. It's different if, you know, you've got like 3 or 4 of you all starting together at one thing like that. But that's probably one, so we'll definitely look at that. Kate, you relatively recently moved to Taiwan.
I did.
And so tell us a little bit about that experience.
So yes, like Joe, I had that experience of going into a new office where everybody knows each other, and similarly to Rome, a lot of people have been there for a long time and have very kind of established relationships and friendships, and also histories that you don't necessarily know about. Like maybe 2 colleagues don't get on at all, and you don't know that.
That's another topic we'll be coming back to later for sure.
Right.
Yes.
So that can be really complicated. So yes, that was quite intimidating in some ways, and something that I definitely felt I had to prepare for. Also because I had come from the British Council in France and I moved to the British Council in Taiwan for a new job. But I also didn't know if anybody in Taiwan had applied for that job and I had got it instead of them, which was possible. I don't know. Yeah. So you also people have perhaps a preconception about you and you don't know what that's going to be. So yeah, I just tried to go in there with a kind of an open mind, and I didn't specifically prepare them, but thinking about it, I have some sort of go-to topics of conversation. Like when you arrive in a new place, you can ask people who've been there for a long time, you know, so what should I do while I'm here? What should I visit? What would you recommend? are there any good restaurants around here for lunch? Things like that. And I think people quite like to give advice and to share their experiences. So that for me, it's quite a safe topic of conversation. People aren't going to be offended or feel that you're being too personal with them too quickly. And you also get to know what people like, what people value. And so I think that's quite a helpful way to start a professional relationship.
Okay, great. That's really useful. And I think we're going to explore what you just spoke about there a little more now, which is you mentioned the fact that, okay, you don't want to go too quickly. You don't want to appear pushy, but at the same time, you don't want to be sat on your own at lunch with a cup of coffee someplace and nobody's speaking to you. You mentioned about asking questions and asking people for advice. How about that kind of, is that a useful kind of technique, a way in? You also mentioned about safe topics. We'll talk about that in a minute, perhaps separately. But the idea of, being the new person and asking people for advice, for information, for putting yourself in that position. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice. Thanks, Kate.
Oh, welcome, anytime.
And people like to talk about themselves. They like to talk about their experience, don't they? And it serves a double purpose because it's actually something that you do need to know.
Yeah.
And maybe people will give you conflicting information. So then it's up to you also to decide which piece of advice you're going to take.
Yeah.
But it's always nice to ask people about their experience, and you get to know them as well as pick up on some advice.
Yeah.
But similar to that, I think that another tip could be to ask about people's experiences. Like, I think that whatever people have on their phone background or their screensaver is a good thing to talk about. And it's quite public, so it's probably going to be a safe topic as well. So you can ask them like, oh, is that your daughter? Or is that your cat? Or is that your typewriter?
See, that actually is my typewriter. So
No way.
okay.
You have a typewriter, Neil.
I have an Imperial good How else would I be able to write my lesson plans?
That's such a great question. Yeah.
No. But it's an interesting question because you're absolutely right. It's pets, it's family members, it's perhaps holidays, or in my case, because I'm not like other people, it's a typewriter. But yeah, okay.
Typewriters are quite cool now, I think. Are they?
Yeah, retro.
Retro. Yeah.
1938 works perfectly.
Are you a Taylor Swift fan?
Am I what?
A Taylor Swift fan?
Could be.
What do you think about that line in her new song that says, "Who uses typewriters anyway?"
Let Neil go first, and then I will just repeat a TikTok I saw about it.
Okay.
No, I'm going to let you go with that one because your line's going to be better than mine.
Go on.
Well, do you remember what the lyric is?
You left your typewriter at my apartment, straight from the tortured poet's department.
Yeah.
And I think things I never say, like, who uses typewriters anyway?
Yeah. And do you have any theories about who it's about?
Oh, no,
Yes.
I don't really keep track of that sort of thing. Is it her ex-boyfriend?
Yes.
Presumably? I don't know.
I feel it might be a bit harsh. It might be suggesting that having a typewriter is pretentious.
It might be possibly suggesting that,
it might
yes.
just, I may be reading too much into it.
I'm
but I
not sure
feel
you
it
are,
might be-
Neil.
Because it's been kind of linked to this tall, not very nice, in my opinion, man from an indie band.
Ah, that man. Yes, let's not name him. Yeah. We know.
I think it could be seen to be pretentious. But actually, I saw a TikTok
Thanks.
that talked about how the whole album is about Ted Hughes and Sylvia Plath.
Oh, actually,
Yes.
that does add up. Okay.
And it's from Sylvia Plath's perspective, and the typewriter belongs to Ted Hughes, the poet.
Okay, we've just opened up a whole
I'm
other
sorry, this
podcast
is
here.
not about how to get along with your colleagues.
We
It's
will
about
be back
how
with-
to write songs
yes.
about people you did not get along with.
We will be back with another podcast in a few weeks that will look into this very topic.
I will
because,
be there. I can't wait.
Okay. Let's go back to the question.
Sorry.
I mean,
If we were new colleagues and you saw that background on Neil's phone and this was your first conversation with
Exactly.
Neil, great first conversation.
Yeah, and great
Right?
first conversation for us to have
We've
too.
bonded
because-
over Taylor Swift
Absolutely,
immediately, which,
yeah.
I mean, who doesn't?
to be fair, it's only Joe's like third or fourth conversation with me, and most
think
of
it's
them have
going
been
well.
like, most of them have been like, "Have you got an iron?" So it's like
Yes.
that's what. So yes,
So we've delved much deeper
Exactly,
here.
we've gone to a whole other level
Yeah.
just here live.
Your
So-
advice is clearly great.
Yep, there you go.
About the photo on the phone.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
Tip
you
number
started
one.
it. Well done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spy carefully, peer over your colleagues' shoulders, and make sure you know what their wallpaper is.
Yes.
Okay. just going back to that, you mentioned about safe topics
Yeah.
early. Now, okay, I mean that's fine when you first start up. You're going to talk about the weather or the trip to work or stuff like that. What are other topics? Maybe I'm not saying not safe, but how would you kind of progress and move things forward? Some of it could be related to work, perhaps. Would you kind of ask for advice or work and things like that? I don't know. Or when do you move on to kind of, you said not to get too personal, which is absolutely good advice. Nobody wants to answer personal questions the first time they meet someone.
No.
How do you know when to kind of move forward from that kind of thing, though, perhaps?
I think that's something where you have to just read the room, to use that expression. Every culture is different. When I say culture, I don't mean the country that you're in, or although it can be obviously affected by the country you're in, but each organization, each office has its own culture. And every place I've worked has had a different workplace culture. So I've worked in places where everybody there is very, very close. Like in restaurants I've worked in, for example, where people often know a lot about each other's lives. And then the conversation is pretty much immediately very personal. Which is, it's in some ways that's a kind of profession that lends itself to more socializing. So it's maybe normal that would happen. But then I think in other cultures, office cultures I've been in, you really do stick to kind of, like we said, safe topics. So things like, your experience living in a country, travel, holiday, food, maybe a little bit about family, friends.
So you used a great expression there, which people may not have come across before listening, about read the room.
Yeah.
And so basically what you're saying there is, as well as jumping in and starting your country, but listen and watch and kind of observe a lot. What would you say?
I think that's some really good advice that you said, Neil. Like listen, observe a lot, and I would say observe the specific colleagues. So, with some colleagues, it might be more appropriate to get more personal quicker because you have things in common, because you've bonded, you have a shared interest, you've laughed, or you've maybe done something together, or you've been through something hard together. That can also bring people together. So then obviously, with that colleague, you would move on to a more personal relationship. But then with people who are maybe older or younger than you, but not always, because of course you can be friends with people of any age. But there might be some more distance there. Also, it might depend on your seniority in the organization.
Yeah.
Like, it might not be always appropriate for you to be best friends with people who are like a lot above you or a lot below you in the organization. So it really depends on where they are in the organization and where they are in their lives and where you can meet them.
Yeah. And that's really
and as you mentioned, there's a lot to think about there. When we talk about culture, you're not just talking about different countries and cultures and so on, but specific office culture. You mentioned about age and seniority. All of these are kind of things. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
No. But I think what you said about watching and listening to the general culture and also individual people's behavior, that's much more important than talking to begin with, I think.
But another thing I was going to say, and it's kind of slightly negative, I know you won't like that, Neil.
No, because I'm, famous for my positivity.
Is sometimes like when certain things don't work, if you complain together, it can be a way of bonding. For example, there is one, thing that we have to use that's for admin that's old and is being replaced very, very soon, that I won't say the name of. But it's something that is kind of, it's tedious and it's difficult to use. So, asking for someone's advice, like Kate said earlier, but then also saying, doesn't this not work very well? And wouldn't it be better if they replaced it, which they're going to soon. So that's great. So something like that, maybe a little complaint can also help people bond.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So anyone listening from Jo's office knows very well what she's talking about. For the rest of us, perhaps not.
Mysterious.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Mysterious admin systems.
No, I to be honest, nobody loves complaining more than me. So yeah, you're right. If somebody wanted to bond with me in the office, that's it. You absolutely find that thing and just wind me up and let me go, and that's it. And we'll be best friends in half an hour. But let's continue down the slightly negative path. It's not negative, but what about problems? You mentioned earlier about that you might have colleagues who are who have some conflict or don't get on. There's the whole question of kind of, I guess, office politics and things like that. It might be that you start work and, you know, your scenario was maybe someone had applied for your job and not got it, and they might have been like,
which could have happened.
Just waiting to, like, you know, just meet you and just, you know.
Waiting to hate me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it can happen, you know, it can happen that, you know, you start a new job and there's a colleague or that you just somehow don't hit it off with, don't get on with. What would you do in that situation?
You know, if it depends on which way around it was. If I took a disliking to somebody immediately, I would probably try to talk to myself and say, this is a bias that you have and you don't really know that person. So try to give them a second chance. But sometimes people just rub you up the wrong way and they've made their impression and then that's it. And so you look for things that confirm that bias that you have. And so I would just try to keep my distance from that person and ignore them. If it's the other way around and there's someone who has a problem with me for some reason, then
surely
I'd probably...
Surely that could never happen.
It has happened.
No.
It has happened.
No, stop
it. Obviously, I let it affect me and I cry myself to sleep at night. But after that, I just, again, try to ignore them and, you know, say that probably that has something more to do with that person than it has to do with me. And maybe that's also something I should think about when I make assumptions or prejudices against other people. It has more to do with me than it does to them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just remember that if somebody has a problem with you in the office, that they have their thing going on, they're human, you're human. Keep your distance and focus on the good things.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any kind of experience like Joe's that you could...
of people not liking me?
I know.
I mean,
Neil,
please, Neil.
How dare you?
It's yeah, no, I'm trying to imagine a scenario, but you're right. It's an impossibility.
No, loads of people hate me. And I'm fine with that. I think Joe's advice was really good that if somebody takes a dislike to you, it says more about them than it does about you. And also, even it's not necessarily about dislikes, but just if somebody seems to be a bit abrupt with you or not particularly friendly, you don't know what's going on in their own life, you know, what they've got going on at home or in terms of maybe their health or whatever. There could be so many things that are affecting somebody. And I think everybody is inclined to think that it's all about them. I always, if I have a conflict with someone, I'm like, well, it's something I've done or they hate me or something. Maybe they're just having a bad day. And that's really all it is, you know? Or maybe they just, I don't know, they've met somebody similar to me who they disliked in the past. So when they meet me, they think they're not going to like me. So it's a bad start. I don't know, you know, anything like that. But I think you're right. You need to remember that it's the other person's, like it's their life, it's their situation. And when you take a dislike to someone, that's because of your life and your situation. But I think if you have to work together, despite not getting on, if you're on the same team or whatever, some good advice that I heard was just to really focus on the professional points and when possible to compliment the other person on something they've done professionally, you know. So even things like, oh, thanks for sending that report over or, oh, those notes were really helpful. It's, you know, you're not talking about their personality or anything like that, but maybe you can create a more positive working relationship. Keep
it on a professional level and just focus on the positives of that and how things work well for that. And I think what you said a moment ago is true as well about like not kind of rushing to judgment, to give it time as well, because as you say, it could be something else outside and, you know, don't just immediately, you know, I'm terrible for that. So I make snap judgments, but you're right. Put it off, wait a while, let them see where things go. And then, as you say, work on the professional level, focus on the positives of that. Okay, you were going to say something else, Jo?
No, I was just going to add to what Kate said. Like when you have conflict in the office, it's always a good idea to focus on the work and focus on your shared goal together.
Okay, I'm going to try and finish on a super positive one. Now we've done all the negative ones.
Okay, great.
Is it Taylor Swift again?
I'm never going to forgive you for the typewriter comment. You know, even though you're only quoting Taylor Swift, I know that
I wondered how you felt about it.
Yeah, that's fine. No, Let's talk about a positive experience to finish with. You know, one thing about being teachers, I mean, I guess you've moved several times to different places, different countries, different teaching centers. What? Tell me about one of your happiest memories of an office that you joined or a place that you joined, where perhaps you felt very quickly at home and you just seemed to really get on with people really well, or the people were just so great that, you know, you thought, this is the place for me.
Well, I'm very lucky that's happened to me a few times. It happened to me in my first teaching job in Barcelona at Merit School. My boss was really good at hiring a team, and he hired a team of people that got on well together. And another time was when I moved to Colombia, Bogota, and I started to work for the British Council. I had 2 friends who worked there already. So it was like I had an immediate friendship group because I just joined their friendship group. And that,
Very lucky.
very lucky.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Kate?
I would say, similarly, I've been very lucky in most of the places I've worked. I've joined the team and found people I've got on with, and really fitted in immediately, which is so lucky. When I moved to Taiwan, one fun thing was that quite a lot of British Council colleagues there said, "Oh, I know you from the mini English lessons." So that was really fun. But in terms of my whole professional experience so far, I would say the one that stands out would be when I was working in London, teaching English to people who came to study intensive courses. Can I say the name of the school or no?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so it was at Eurocentres London Central. And I don't know if the school is still going, but there was a team of teachers there who were just amazing. And I left that school 9 or 10 years ago, and we still have a WhatsApp group that is active to this day, which is just incredible. There's about 7 or 8 of us in the group, and we talk all the time. And I just think it's just so lucky.
Someone's still asking, have you got my hairdryer?
Where's that really nice pen I had? Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So it's great to finish on nice positive stories like that. We've run out of time, but we'll be back for lots more of these in future. So for anyone watching, we have lots more content coming up in the coming months. Our podcast, Kate's already mentioned our mini English lessons, of which we have many. And just keep following us and check out everything that we share. And I'm sure you'll find lots of stuff that will help you and that you'll enjoy. So thanks for listening, and bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We really care about your English, so if you like this episode, make sure you subscribe because we've got lots more great content for you to explore.